My name is Margaret Elaine Holt. I'm 49 years old, and I've spent more than half my life making sure other people don't screw things up when the stakes are too high for mistakes. The morning everything started unraveling, my alarm went off at 4 a.m. and I was already awake. That happens when your mind refuses to shut down because too many people depend on you doing your job right. Contract renewal season does that. So does knowing one wrong decision can cost hundreds of people their livelihoods. Before I even thought about work, I checked on Adam, 8 years old, sound asleep. Backpack already by the door where I'd left it the night before. His baseball glove sat on the chair like it always did, exactly where he dropped it. Some people think routines are boring. I think they're survival. My partner, Daniel, was still asleep upstairs. He handled mornings when he could, but this week was critical for me. Guardianship review in 5 weeks. Court documents didn't care how tired you were. I'm the Senior Director of Field Operations at Ridgeline Power Systems. We're the kind of company nobody notices until something goes wrong. Generators, transfer switches, emergency power for military installations. When the lights go out on a base, we're the call nobody wants to make, but everyone is relieved to hear answered. I've been doing this for 26 years. Started young, fresh out of the service. Crawling through mechanical rooms, learning how diesel generators breathe. Worked my way up the hard way. Crew lead, supervisor, operations manager. Now I'm the one who keeps us legally compliant across 14 military installations in 4 states. The kitchen light was already on when I came downstairs. Daniel sat at the table with reading glasses on, surrounded by paperwork. I recognized the blue folder immediately. Guardianship documents. The attorney's office called, he said without looking up. They want updated employment verification and insurance confirmation by the 18th, and bank statements again. I'll handle it, I said, pouring coffee into my thermos. HR can send the employment letter. Insurance cards are in the filing cabinet. He nodded, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Adam wasn't biologically mine. He was my grandson, and his father, my son, had made choices that forced the state to step in. Pills after a warehouse injury. Prescriptions turning into excuses, then disappearances, arrests, missed court dates. When the police found my son passed out in a parking lot with Adam strapped in the back seat for 6 hours, the state didn't hesitate. Emergency custody, then temporary guardianship. Now we were fighting for permanent stability. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my son. Need to talk about my son. Serious. Call me back. His son. Like Adam was a possession he could reclaim when it suited him. Nothing good ever came from his messages before sunrise. I slid the phone into my pocket without replying. Work first. I arrived at the office by 6 a.m., binders already stacked in the main conference room. Color-coded tabs. Red for urgent deadlines, yellow for compliance, blue for audits. People like to call physical documentation outdated. Those people have never watched an 8-figure contract hang by a thread while someone frantically searches a shared drive nobody organized properly. By 8 a.m., the room filled. Department heads, supervisors, crew chiefs. Then Trenton Marlowe walked in, 34, slim fit suit, MB. A confidence you could smell from across the room. He didn't walk, he glided. The kind of man who'd studied leadership theory but never fixed anything with his own hands. New Director of Operational Excellence. 12 weeks on the job. He clicked his presentation remote and the screen lit up. Strategic Cost Optimization. I didn't get to open my binder. After reviewing our expenditures, Trenton announced, I've identified legacy travel practices that are no longer justified. Our annual Washington compliance trip, he continued, is being discontinued. I set my coffee down carefully. That trip, he smiled, not kindly. That's outdated thinking, he replied. We're moving to modern processes. I understood then. He didn't want my expertise. He wanted a win. Okay, I said, closing my binder. I complied. And that was the moment everything changed. Walking back to my desk after that meeting felt like crossing an invisible line. Nothing had changed physically. The same cubicles, the same low hum of printers and keyboards, but the atmosphere had shifted. People avoided my eyes. Conversations dipped into whispers as I passed. 26 years of being the person everyone relied on, and suddenly I was something fragile, something awkward. I sat down, logged into the travel system, and canceled the Washington trip. Washington, D.C., June 12th to June 18th. Reason: administrative directive. The system flagged the non-refundable deposit. $740 gone in a click. A trivial number compared to what was coming, though nobody in that building understood that yet. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my son. Don't ignore me. I know my rights. My lawyer says I can petition for custody review. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back carefully. Adam has school. Weekend works better. Let me know a specific time. Then I turned the phone face down. I didn't have the emotional bandwidth for manipulation before noon. At 9:30 a.m., I sent an email to Shayla Vance, the new compliance coordinator Trenton had hired straight out of hospitality management. 23 years old, bright smile, no understanding of federal contracting. The email was thorough, painfully thorough. Every contact, every form, every requirement, every deadline bolded in red. June 17th, 5 p.m. Eastern. No extensions. I CC'd Trenton. Then I forwarded the same email to my personal account. Receipts mattered. About 20 minutes later, Vince appeared at my desk. Senior field tech, built like a refrigerator. The kind of man who remembered torque specs from 15 years ago and never trusted software without a paper backup. You're really just letting this happen? He asked quietly. Not my call anymore, I said, not looking up. You know what happens if we lose base access. I know exactly what happens. Then why aren't you fighting it? I finally turned to face him, lowering my voice. Because if I fight, I become the problem. If I push back, Trenton gets to paint me as resistant, obsolete, emotional. This way, he owns it. Every decision, every consequence. Vince studied my face for a moment, then nodded slowly. You documenting everything? Yes. What can I do? Keep your eyes open and make sure your paperwork is spotless. He left without another word. By mid-afternoon, Trenton showed up at my desk, still riding the high from his morning performance. Sandra from IT trailed behind him, tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. We're implementing some security updates, Trenton said cheerfully. Sandra needs to adjust your portal access. Sandra wouldn't meet my eyes. It's standard, she muttered. Translation. They were locking me out of the DoD compliance systems. Whatever you need, I said evenly. Just let me know when it's done. Trenton smiled, satisfied. Excellent attitude. Really shows adaptability. Then he added, almost casually, I've got a new project for you. Comprehensive inventory audit. Parts, physical count, reconciliation. I want you leading it personally. 26 years of institutional knowledge reduced to counting boxes. Happy to contribute wherever I'm needed, I replied. They walked away. Sandra glanced back once, apologetic. The lockout happened before end of day. I sent Vince a quick text. They cut my portal access. Need your help documenting field side issues. His reply came 30 seconds later. Already on it. Something's weird with Shayla's submissions. For the first time all day, I smiled. The next 3 weeks felt like watching a house burn while being told not to call the fire department. I was reassigned to the warehouse. Barcode scanners, clipboards, counting inventory while compliance meetings happened without me. Shayla ran presentations she barely understood. Trenton mistook confidence for competence, and nobody challenged him. Every night, I came home exhausted. Daniel noticed. You're quiet, he said one evening as we washed dishes side by side. I'm thinking, I replied. About work? About timing. He didn't push. He never did. That was one of the reasons I trusted him with my life. And Adam's. One night, as I sat on the couch reviewing inventory spreadsheets, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was my son, using someone else's phone again. I'm working. It's never a good time with you. You think you can just take my kid and pretend I don't exist? I didn't take anyone, I said, my voice steady. The state placed Adam with us because you failed 4 drug tests and missed your custody hearings. That was one time. It was a pattern. Silent, then colder. When you lose your job, we'll see what the court thinks about stability. The line went dead. I sat there in the warehouse, phone still in my hand, surrounded by neatly stacked parts I'd counted twice already. When you lose your job, someone had been talking. Back at the office the next morning, Sandra caught me in the hallway, eyes darting. I shouldn't be telling you this, she whispered, but I still have admin access to the compliance logs. Shayla's submissions keep getting rejected. She doesn't understand why. How many? 3 so far. And the deadline? 4 days. I closed. Screenshot everything, I said. Store it somewhere Trenton can't access. I could lose my job. You might anyway, she nodded. And nobody in charge seemed to hear it. By the time the calendar flipped to the second week of June, the tension in the building had thickened into something you could feel in your chest. It wasn't panic yet. Panic required awareness. This was worse. This was confidence built on ignorance. I spent my days in the warehouse, scanner in hand, counting parts that hadn't moved in years. Emergency transfer switches, backup fuses, components that only mattered when everything else failed. It felt symbolic in a way I didn't like. Every morning, I sent Trenton a status report. Inventory progress, reconciliation notes, efficiency metrics he'd asked for. He never replied. Shayla, meanwhile, ran compliance meetings with bullet points pulled straight from generic training manuals. I heard fragments as people passed through the warehouse doors, streamlining verification pathways. Digital-first compliance mindset. Reducing friction with federal partners. Words that sounded impressive until you tried to apply them to a system that hadn't changed since before she was born. Vince kept me updated from the field. Screenshots, timestamps, notes scribbled in the margins of scanned documents. 2 weeks before the deadline, he forwarded me something that made my stomach drop. An internal message from Shayla to the DoD verification portal. I don't understand what a base access credential verification matrix is. Can we substitute our standard company employee ID system? I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Using internal employee IDs for DoD base access was the fastest way to trigger an automatic rejection. It wasn't a mistake you fixed quietly. It was the kind that flagged your entire submission for review. Every instinct screamed at me to intervene, to walk her through it, to fix it like I had dozens of times before, to protect the company, the crews, the contracts. Then I remembered Trenton's smile, the way he'd dismissed decades of experience as legacy thinking, the way everyone in that conference room had looked anywhere but at me while I was being publicly dismantled. So I did nothing. That decision didn't come easily. It sat in my chest like a weight, heavy and uncomfortable. But it was deliberate. I wasn't responsible for a system I'd been locked out of. My phone rang that evening while I was still at the warehouse. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Margaret, my son said. Same voice, same tone, different phone. You keep avoiding me. I'm busy. You're scared, he said. You know things are shaky at your job. People talk. My grip tightened around the phone. Adam is safe, I said. He's stable. He's doing well in school. For now, he replied. Courts care about consistency, income, employment. You don't have a lawyer, I said flatly. And you don't get to use my job as leverage. Silence. Then, quietly, this isn't over. I hung up without another word. Back at my desk the next morning, Sandra slipped a USB drive into my hand, like she was passing contraband. Everything, she whispered. Submission logs, error messages, warning alerts. She opened them all. And she forwarded them to Trenton with a note that said, FYI, routine system notifications. No action needed. Routine. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. 3 federal warning notices. Deadline approaching. Action required. Dismissed as noise. June 17th arrived without drama. No alarms. No emails marked urgent. No frantic phone calls. At 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, the deadline passed. Our base access credentials expired across 14 military installations. Nothing exploded, nothing crashed. Bureaucracy doesn't announce itself when it kills something. It just stops responding. Wednesday was quiet. Thursday, too. Trenton posted a message in Slack about a new wellness initiative. Mindfulness workshops, gratitude journals, celebrating progress toward operational excellence. I watched the clock. Friday morning, the dam broke. Hector from dispatch called me at 9:15. Voice strain. Margaret, something's wrong. The system won't let me schedule the McConnell call-out. Says our authorization credentials are invalid. Did you call the base? They say it's on our end. Bring it to Trenton, I said. He's the expert. 45 minutes later, Vince called from the field. We got turned away at White-Itman. Security says our contractor credentials are expired. 6 technicians sitting in a parking lot. Critical generator overdue for maintenance. No access. By noon, 5 more installations reported denials. Crews idle. Equipment locked behind gates we couldn't open. Penalty clauses ticking forward quietly, mercilessly. Trenton called an emergency meeting at 2 p.m. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked confused. We're experiencing some technical difficulties, he announced. IT is working on it. Probably a synchronization issue. How long? Hector asked. 24 to 48 hours. I sat in the back of the room and said nothing, because it wasn't going to be fixed in 48 hours, and everyone was about to learn exactly why. By the end of that Friday, Ridgeline Power Systems was bleeding in ways most people couldn't see yet. There were no sirens, no flashing dashboards announcing catastrophe, just red text quietly multiplying across internal systems. Authorization denied. Access suspended. Work orders frozen. Each one another small cut. By Monday morning, the dispatch board looked like a crime scene. 11 installations under stop work orders. Crews sitting idle, collecting paychecks for jobs they weren't legally allowed to perform. Technicians pacing parking lots outside military gates, watching equipment they were contractually responsible for, but physically barred from touching. Every missed maintenance window triggered penalty clauses. Every unanswered emergency call stacked another violation. $150,000 per day. That number started circulating in whispers first, then in tight-lipped conversations behind closed doors. Vince showed me field reports over lunch, his jaw tight. Mallory's generator is 6 days past its window. Battery banks at White-Itman haven't been tested in 2 weeks. Transfer switch at Fort Riley is throwing warnings we can't investigate. If something fails, I said quietly, people could get hurt. He nodded once. That was all that needed saying. At home, the pressure followed me through the door. Daniel sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, budget spreadsheet glowing on the screen. Adam was in the living room, hunched over homework, pencil tucked behind his ear. HR sent the employment verification letter, Daniel said. It's dated today. He didn't finish the sentence. If something happened to my job, the guardianship review wouldn't care about explanations. Courts didn't do nuance. They did stability, income, predictability. And my son, my biological son, was circling, waiting for weakness. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet rhythm of the house. Every decision I'd made echoed back at me. Silence a strategy. Compliance instead of confrontation. Had I pushed too far? Monday morning, I was summoned to the executive conference room. It was standing room only. Harrison Caldwell, the CEO, sat at the head of the table. He'd built the company over 40 years, and in the past week, he looked like he'd aged 10. Beside him sat Monica, company counsel, legal pad already filled with notes. Dennis, the CFO, stared at spreadsheets like they might suddenly apologize. And Trenton, he looked smaller somehow, less polished. The confidence that used to radiate off him had cracked, replaced by something brittle. "Sit down, Margaret," Caldwell said. I did, folding my hands neatly in front of me. "We have a situation," he began. "Our base access credentials expired 8 days ago. The Department of Defense has flagged us as non-compliant. We're under stop work orders at 11 installations." He paused, letting the numbers land. Approximately $150,000 per day in penalties, lost revenue, and damages. Trenton cleared his throat. There were failures in the handover process, he said quickly. Documentation gaps, resistance to transition. I was assured everything necessary had been transferred. Monica glanced at me. There are concerns, she said carefully, that you may have been uncooperative with new processes, possibly allowed this to fail to prove a point. I reached into my bag, pulled out a plain manila folder, set it gently in the center of the table. I've worked here 26 years, I said evenly. Never missed a deadline, never failed an audit. Trenton leaned forward. Sending emails doesn't mean you helped when it mattered. I opened the folder. Document 1, I said, sliding the first page forward. Complete handover email. Sent May 21st. CC'd to you. Deadline clearly stated. His jaw tightened. Document 2, I continued. Slack conversation. Shayla asked to schedule time with me. You told her not to distract me with old processes. The room went quiet. Document 3, I said, placing the next page down. IT ticket. Request to remove my access to the compliance portal. Submitted by you. Monica's pen stopped moving. And finally, I said, laying out the last pages, 3 automated DoD warnings. Opened by Shayla. Forwarded to you. Marked routine. I closed the folder. I didn't sabotage anything, I said. I followed instructions. Silence stretched. Caldwell looked at Trenton, something cold settling into his expression. Explain to me, he said quietly, why we're losing $150,000 a day. Trenton opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The silence in that conference room was the kind that pressed against your ears. Not awkward, not uncertain, final. Trenton finally found his voice, but it sounded thinner than I'd ever heard it. I was trying to modernize, he said, prevent micromanagement, build independent problem-solving skills. You prevented the compliance coordinator from consulting the compliance director, Monica replied, her tone sharp now. And you removed the only person with access to the system. Trenton turned toward me, eyes flashing with something close to desperation. You knew this would happen, he said. You set her up to fail. I met his gaze without blinking. I knew the system, I said. That's different. Caldwell leaned forward, elbows on the table. Margaret, he said, slower now. Is this fixable? Yes, I replied, but not by anyone in this room, except me. Trenton exhaled sharply, like that answer physically hurt him. We can hire consultants, he jumped in, specialists, firms that handle federal compliance. You can't, I interrupted, because you don't understand what you broke. Every head turned toward me. The emergency restoration protocol requires a master authorization sequence, I continued, issued during an in-person audit 8 years ago. Physical documentation, contact codes, verification chains that aren't stored digitally for a reason. Caldwell frowned. Where is it? Part of it is memorized, I said. The rest is secured off-site, requires my biometric access. Trenton's face drained of color. You shredded the red binder, I added calmly, 6 weeks ago. Called it dead weight. Monica slowly closed her legal pad. Caldwell stood. Trenton, he said quietly, get out. What? Trenton looked around, disbelieving. You're terminated, Caldwell continued. Immediately. Security will escort you. This is insane, Trenton snapped. She let this happen. Caldwell's voice dropped. No, he said. You did. Trenton's chair scraped loudly as he stood. He didn't look at me as he left, but I watched through the glass walls as security intercepted him before he reached his office. Watched him gather his things into a cardboard box, while the rest of the building pretended not to stare. 12 weeks of confidence gone in 12 minutes. Caldwell sat back down, shoulders sagging. Margaret, he said, I owe you an apology. I didn't respond. We need you, he continued. On a flight to Washington tonight, whatever it takes. Salary increase, bonus, benefits, name it. 6 months ago, that offer would have felt like validation. Today, it felt late. I've already made my decision, I said, reaching into my bag again. This time, I slid a sealed envelope across the table. My resignation, I said, effective immediately. Monica inhaled sharply. Caldwell stared at the envelope like it might explode.
"You can't walk away," he said. "Not now."
"I already did," I replied, "weeks ago. You just didn't notice." He followed me out of the room, still talking. Doubling the salary, tripling it, equity, board seat, anything. I packed my desk while he negotiated with himself. "Think about your coworkers," he pleaded. 400 people depend on this company. "Then maybe you shouldn't have let someone convince you I was the problem," I said, zipping my bag. I walked out without looking back. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed. My son. Another number. "Heard things aren't going great at work. Interesting timing with the custody stuff." I typed one message. "Adam stays with us." Blocked the number. Drove away. I didn't go home. I drove straight to the airport, muscle memory guiding me through the turns like I'd done this 100 times before. Maybe I had, just never like this. Daniel answered on the second ring. "Harrison Caldwell keeps calling the house," he said without preamble. "What happened?" I resigned. There was a pause. Not shock, just recalibration. "Okay," he said finally. "Talk to me." I told him everything. The lockout, the warnings, the meeting, Trenton's termination, the envelope sliding across the table. "And the guardianship?" he asked quietly. "It doesn't change," I said. "Adam stays with us. That's non-negotiable." Another pause. "Noah called here too," Daniel added. "Talking about lawyers again." "He's bluffing," I said. "And even if he wasn't, I've got documentation that would bury him." I checked in for my flight, one way, to Washington, D.C., business class. Caldwell had already booked it, apparently hoping proximity might change my mind. It didn't. As I waited at the gate, my phone filled with messages. "Please talk to me. Board meeting tonight. We're considering selling the company. Name your price." I read them all. Didn't reply. Once airborne, I ordered coffee and stared out the window as the city lights blurred below. Somewhere beneath us, 14 military bases had backup systems overdue for maintenance. Somewhere, 400 people were wondering if they'd have jobs in a month. And somewhere, Caldwell was learning the most expensive lesson of his career. Experience isn't theoretical. Midway through the flight, I finally typed a response. Consulting rate, $2,000 per hour, 100-hour minimum. Paid in full before work begins. Travel and expenses billed separately. Availability begins 1 week from today. I added one more line before hitting send. These terms are non-negotiable. Then I turned my phone off. I slept better than I had in weeks. The hotel room was quiet, clean sheets, room service that didn't taste like compromise. For the first time in decades, I wasn't on a Pentagon trip disguised as duty. The next morning, I walked through the Smithsonian like I'd promised myself I would someday. Letting time slow down. Letting myself exist outside of crisis. When I turned my phone back on that afternoon, there were 18 missed calls. One text. "We accept." I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped letting anyone forget what I was worth. I didn't respond right away. That was new for me. For 26 years, my instinct had been to act immediately, to fix problems before they metastasized. But standing in the quiet of that hotel room, sunlight spilling across the carpet, I let the silence sit. They had accepted my terms, which meant they had finally understood their position. Daniel called while I was packing to check out. "They agreed, didn't they?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Good," he replied simply. "Adam hit a double at practice yesterday. Looked for you in the stands anyway." That landed harder than any offer Caldwell had made. "I'll be home tonight," I said. The board meeting happened without me. Caldwell filled in the gaps the best he could. By the time I arrived back at headquarters 2 days later, not as an employee but as a consultant, the building felt different, quieter, more careful. People watched me walk through the doors like I was something fragile and dangerous at the same time. Vince caught my eye from across the floor and nodded once. Hector looked relieved. Sandra looked terrified I might be angry with her. I wasn't. Caldwell met me in a small conference room, not the big one. No audience this time. "We've wired the full amount," he said, "and legal has the consulting agreement ready." I reviewed it without rushing. Every clause, every protection, termination penalties, indemnification, full autonomy. When I signed, it wasn't with relief, it was with clarity. Restoring DoD credentials took 6 days. 6 long, precise, exhausting days of meetings, physical verification, and phone calls to people who only answered because they knew my name. Credentials were reinstated, stop work orders lifted. Crews went back through the gates. The bleeding stopped. On the 7th day, I walked away again. This time, nobody tried to stop me. At home, the guardianship review came and went without incident. Stable employment, stable household, stable environment. My son didn't show. He sent one last message instead. "Guess you landed on your feet." I blocked the number and deleted the thread. Adam asked me that night if I was going to work late anymore. "No," I told him, "not like before." He smiled and went back to his homework, secure in the kind of certainty kids are supposed to have. A week later, Caldwell emailed me. "We're restructuring leadership. Institutional Knowledge Committee. Training program in your honor." I didn't reply. Some lessons arrive too late to be thanked for. Respect, I'd learned, isn't something you negotiate after it's gone. It's something you demand by being willing to walk away. And the price of forgetting that? Sometimes it's $150,000 a day.